Hello, welcome back to this video on questions related to algebra, which falls into the paper 2 section 2 optional questions. Um, Before we go into any detail, let's see how well you understand certain basic concepts in algebra. On your screen you see an expression x squared plus 12x plus, and you have a blank space here. Can you complete the square here? Pause the video and write out what term will go here in this blank here. Pause the video. Remember, the greatest self-delusion you can suffer is to believe that you know something when in fact you don't really know it. Now to, to check to see if you really know something, you have to do the exercise. So pause the video, write out the completion of the square here. What term goes here to complete the square? You have x squared plus 12x plus what? Have you done so? Great. Let's see. The term that goes here is half of this term, middle term here, the coefficient in front of the x, the variable x. So divide 12 by 2, you get 6, and you get 6 squared. So the 36 completes the square, is a perfect square. Did you get that? Let's do another example. X squared minus 4x plus, what goes here? You have an example to follow. Pause the video, write it out. So you get a half of 4 is 2 squared equal to 4. So the term that goes there is 4. X squared minus 4x plus 4 is a perfect square. Did you get that? So these are basic concepts in algebra that you need to understand: the perfect square, completion of the term, and so on. So what the CSEC examiners are testing on in section 2 Section 2, as you know, carries optional questions. It is algebra, relations, functions, and graphs. Here we're focusing on algebra. The examiners want to know, not knowing, many students to perform poorly because they do not know what the CSEC examiners are testing for. Well, they're testing your knowledge of the terms. For example, what is meant by a variable, what is meant by an unknown, what is meant by completion of the square, what's meant by a perfect square, and so on. What is? And they're testing your skills to manipulate algebraic expressions and your competencies to apply that skill to solving problems. On the question related to algebra, for example, the question 2 of a past CSEC paper tested candidates' ability to what? Use the distributive property of multiplication over addition. Do you know what is the distributive property of something? Well, if you don't know the meaning of the term, you won't be able to solve the problem in mathematics. Testing your knowledge. What is the distributive property of something? Solve a linear equation in one unknown. Factorize quadratic functions involving difference of squares. If you don't know what is meant by difference of squares, what is meant by quadratic function, well, you'll be puzzled and baffled by the questions. Solve worded problems involving a pair of simultaneous or simultaneous equations, depending on how you want it pronounced. Do you know what's a simultaneous equation? If you don't, you have to open your textbook and look up, write out the question and the definition of a simultaneous equation, difference of squares. You have to know these terms. Now, lower order questions. When you use your textbook, you have to ask yourself lower order questions. What is, for example, What is the distributive property of multiplication over addition? If you don't know the distributive property and the other properties, well, you'll be puzzled. What is a linear equation? Can you pause the video and say what the linear equation is? Can you describe it? Can you explain it? What is a quadratic function? What is a function? What is meant by the difference of squares? All those questions you need to know before you can attempt solving the questions in section 2. The reason why most students are baffled by questions in section 2, because first of all, they do not have the knowledge of the definition of the terms. Now, higher order questions. How to solve a linear equation in one unknown. Can you explain to your study buddy or your classmate or your relative how to solve a linear equation in one unknown? Can you pause the video and attempt to say it out loud, how to solve a linear equation? You need to be able to do this before even attempting to solve the problem. How to factorize a quadratic function involving a difference of squares. Can you explain that to your classmate? Are there any differences and similarities between a linear and a quadratic equation? Describe the number of ways you can solve a linear equation. How is your knowledge of algebra organized? Can you create a mental model, concept map of what you know of algebra? In another modules, I'll show you how to create mental models, concept maps, and so on. These techniques, these learning strategies boost your understanding and retention of information related to mathematics, so that come exam time, you'll be able to recall the information quickly and accurately and be able to use it because you understand the basic concepts and principles.